Hello, yes, that's right, it's Joe here, live for Joyrider TV from the Wildwind Workshop down here in Vassiliki on the Greek island of Lefkos, coming from Wildwind Sailing Holidays, which has got to be one of the best places on the planet to go catamaran sailing. No word of an exaggeration. Hope everybody is having a good day so far. It's certainly more champagne on the table today here in Vassiliki Bay. Bit of a slow start with the wind, but right now it's probably about 14, 15 knots, glassy flat water and blue sky, wind straight from Mount Olympus, and there's dolphins, mermaids, people giving out hot dogs, that sort of thing. So not a bad day. As you will know, this is a live Q&A session, so if you do happen to be watching this later when it's not live, you can still ask questions. Just put them in the comments and then I'll respond to those questions in next week's Q&A session, which is always on Friday at 5:30 Greek time. You'll have to work that out. So in on the live chat already, we have got Hanny from Holland. No sailing today, no wind, so can watch live. Hello, Hanny. Great to have you with us. We've got Tor on board, who says, first question, in fact, we're going straight in. Tor has got a 1982 Hobie 16 and my jib sheet slips out of the cam cleat. I replaced the rope and it still slips out. Okay, yeah, there's a few things. In fact, I'm just going to get something. Just getting something. It's all right. Okay, all right. So I didn't have what I thought I might have had, but there's all right. So if your jib sheet or main sheet, because on the old boats there's a slightly different plate which holds the cleats. So if I can just draw what this plate looks like, this is a very rough drawing. Here's a cleat. The cleat would sit kind of like here. So this would be where this plate anchors, allowing it to kind of pivot both ways. Is everyone with me so far? And then the cleat would be here, and then the rope would come in and you pull the rope and the cleat, in theory, will hold the rope. Now stay tuned because this is very interesting. So the first thing to check, if you've replaced the rope, it's pretty unlikely that the rope would be the reason why it jumps out of the cleat. Hold on, I'm just going to draw the cleat on here. So it's kind of flat at the front, rounded at the sides. Kind of like that. Yeah, so the first one is, are your springs good in your cleat? So when you open it, does it spring shut? If not, if it's one of these Harken cleats, perhaps on the older boat you might not have these cleats, but these are really easy to change the springs. You just have to take the bolts out, then you pop the back part off, and then can you see that in there? That is the spring. I'm not going to do it with the back off, operate the cleat, because if the spring jumps out, then might lose the spring. But these springs do snap after a while. So if the spring has snapped, it will need replacing. So anybody who is a Harken dealer will be able to get hold of those springs. There we go. So first one, the springs. Now, if your cleat is slipping, so rather than the rope jumping out, if it's slipping, it might actually be, you might have a cleat made from plastic rather than metal, and over time the jaws are going to wear, and eventually they might wear so much that they can no longer grip the rope. Ooh, nasty. All right, so that is that. But what I'm thinking in Tor's situation here, because of the age of his boat, where the cleat goes on this plate, I'm hoping this is right, because we used to have boats like this. There's actually slots like this where the bolts go. So that's a slot that's actually goes all the way through this plate. So you could have the cleat here, or you could have the cleat further back. Now, what you need to make sure is that the cleat is as far forwards as possible, which might be counterintuitive, because you'd think if I put it as far back as possible, then the angle is going to mean it holds the rope better. But these do slip over time. So put the cleat as far forwards as possible, and then that should hold the rope. There we go. That is what I believe the problem is there. Okay. So we have got Laura on board in Fleet 240 Santa Cruz. Great to have you on board, Laura, as always. Question: in the race sequence, before you go over the start line, how do you keep your boat in the idle position? So for those of you who haven't raced at all, it is before the start of the race. Here we go. This is our wind as labeled. Before the start of the race, it is an important skill to have, is holding your boat in a position. Now, it is, especially as the wind gets stronger, it's not actually possible to hold the boat in an exact position for a long period of time. But like if we've got, this is what a start line would be like. You'd have what's called the committee boat at one end, and then at the other end you'd have what is called the pin end. And then between the committee boat and the pin end, that is your start line like that. And to save any ambiguity on whereabouts on the committee boat does the start line go to, it would go from the mast where the flags are being flown. So there we go. That is the start line. So before the start of the race, especially if there's a lot of boats, it is necessary to park your boat. Boat's going to be blue. All right. So to park your boat, holding position, there are a few different ways that we could do it. But firstly, unless it's very unusual circumstances, you're generally going to be wanting to have your boat stopped on starboard tack. And you want to have your boat stopped in a position where you can get to the start line without having to tack. The guys here who are teaching racing have actually introduced a zone which is kind of here. You do not want to be parking your boat down here, because if you're parked there, then to get to the start line, you're going to need to tack. And this is what is now called, you're going to like this, this is called the Muppet Zone. All right, so there are specific places we need to put the boat. The next zone where we don't want to be is anywhere up here. And that would actually go for both sides, but we're just generally talking about starting on starboard tack here. So this we'll call the danger zone. Because if your boat is here, now we're going into the right of way rules. If your boat is here and you're coming into the start line from here like this, you have no right of way over anybody who is coming up like this. So it's a very dangerous place to be, because also if you're coming in like this, you'll be quite likely on some sort of reaching course where it is near impossible to, well, it is impossible to stop your boat without actually heading all the way up into the wind. So this is the most dangerous place to be in terms of having a collision and really upsetting people. This is the Muppet zone, because you're quite likely to not get to the start line in time. But this isn't answering Laura's question. This is going to, where should you put your boat? So anywhere in this area. And if we're talking starting the race on starboard tack, let's stick with that, then we could rule out this area as well, because so anywhere in this kind of wedge here is where you'd want to have your boat. And let's say you'd want to, depending on the size of the fleet, if it's a small fleet, you'd want to be somewhere in this area, let's say within 2 minutes to go before the start. If it's a big fleet, like more than 50 boats, then you'd want to be somewhere in this general area, let's say within about 5 minutes to go before the start, because everybody is going to be trying to get into the same area. There we go. So how do we best stop our boat? There are many ways to stop your boat. Can I rub this out? I know it's rather nice. You might have to rewind the video if you want to see that again. So different methods of stopping the boat. They're all pretty similar, actually. So here's the boat. Method one, if in fact, this is all outlined in the video that I did called Stopping the Boat, or Hove 2, that kind of thing. So the first way you can stop the boat is you don't want to be stopping the boat by turning into the wind. So if you put your boat into the wind like this, it's going to be very difficult to get it going again. So what is important is you can get the boat going forwards very easily. And it's usually best not to stop the boat completely. You want to have the boat very slowly going forwards, because if you're not moving at all, your rudders aren't going to work at all, which gives you no options. So there are different things that we can do with the sails. Most straightforward, traveller in the middle, we'll let the jib off and we'll let the main off. And then the boat will sit there quite happily. It will sit quite close to the wind, and it will take a little bit more to get going. So if you did want to get going from this position, you know, and with no main sheet on, you just want to have the rudders just pushed away slightly, just to stop the boat from going too far forwards. And then when you're ready to get going, like if you're getting the 10-second countdown, what I would suggest is pull the jib in first. That's so we pull the jib in first. That's going to just pull the front of the boat slightly away from the wind, which is really going to get you going. Straighten up with the rudders. And then only once you start moving forwards and you can really feel the rudders working, then start to increase the tension in the main sheet as you get to that 8, 7, 6 to the start line. And then main sheet in tight, good upwind sailing position when you're going across the start line. So that is option 1, option A, let's call that. Option B, and this is good if you want to have the boat stopped for longer. So perhaps it's between races and you've got to sit on the boat waiting for the next start sequence for a significant amount of time. Then what I'd suggest there is we'll put the jib on the wrong side. And that means that you can push the rudders all the way across. And if it is a long time and you'd like to be in a relaxed position on the boat, you can actually put your foot on the tiller connecting bar and just hold the rudders across. Then what you've got is the rudders are trying to push the bow this way and the jib is trying to push the bow that way. The end result is you're going to stay in pretty much the same position. Very nice. And then again, when it's time to go, release the jib, get that onto the right side, straighten the rudders up. Don't try to aggressively bear away by pulling the rudders the other way. Just put the rudders straight, let the jib do the work. And again, don't sheet the mainsail in until the boat is definitely. So that is option 2. Now, option 3, what we're going to do is the same with the jib. You could do either version with the jib, but we're going to let the traveller out and have the main sheet a little bit tighter. Now, what that is going to do is that's going to put the boat sitting a bit more off the wind. So with the traveller in, the boat is going to be like here. With the traveller out, the boat's going to be sat a bit more away from the wind like this, which means getting going is a lot easier. Then to get going, all you need to do is straighten up the rudders, pull a little bit of jib on, and then you're off. So those are all of the options. If you put the traveller out and then put the jib on the wrong side, then that's really nice for getting going. But if it's like in the last 30 seconds before the start of the race, I would generally not have the jib on the wrong side, unless you're sailing a boat with quite a small jib which goes across very easily, like on a Dart 18, for example. But on a boat with where the jib doesn't go across easily, like on a Hobie 16, then I would generally have it on the right side, but just eased a bit. You could have it on the right side sheeted in, and then that's going to pull the boat off the wind a bit as well. If you are sailing, I know what you're thinking. What if I'm sailing a boat which has a self-tacking jib and you can't actually sheet it onto the wrong side? Then unfortunately, it's just a case of the crew holding the jib over onto the wrong side with the sheet coming from the jib. So just pulling the track all the way to the wrong side. And there we are. So those are the options. I hope that is helpful. Thought that was quite a good explanation. So continuing in the live chat. Wow, there's quite a lot of live chat, actually. We've got Toot on board in Central Texas, USA. Great to have you with us, Toot. We've got BGVDB, who says, I'm wondering if it would be an option to replace the rigging of my Nacra 6.0 with dyneema lines instead of steel lines. Do you have any recommendations or experience on this topic? Yeah, I've never actually replaced my rigging for dyneema. I've replaced a lot of trapeze lines for dyneema. I know Chris, who's in the live chat, is very experienced with dyneema rigging, but the answer is yes, it's a very good idea. And I believe for the same diameter cable, dyneema is actually stronger than the steel rigging. And with the steel rigging, you don't get any clues before it breaks. It will just break without giving you any signs of it's going to break, because where it breaks is generally under the crimp that holds the wire together, whereas the dyneema rigging is going to last just as long. It looks good and it's just as strong. I'm sure Chris will mention some things in the live chat. There is a place in Texas. I don't know where you are, BGVDB, but if you happen to be in Texas, then there's a good place that makes all the dyneema rigging. But the other nice thing with the dyneema rigging is you can make it yourself. There are so many videos on YouTube about dyneema splicing, and have a few test runs and then off you go. All right, there we go. We've got Max in Rosenheim, Germany. Max says, I hope the Dragoon stuntmen are still in good shape. Yes, they're in good shape and high spirits. Yeah, if you haven't seen yesterday's video sledging number 2 on the Hobie Dragoon, it is an absolute corker. So much wind. The Dragoon is a 13-foot boat with 2 probably combined crew weight about 130 kilos on the Dragoon, and yeah, it was a wild ride indeed. So do check that out if you haven't checked that out. We've got Mark and Janet in St. Mary's, Ohio, USA. Great to have you on board as always. All right. Oh, we've got Toot, who's this. I think this is a good question for everyone. Toot is asking. He's saying he's looking at a Nacra 5.7 and a 6.0. What do you think? So Toot sails a Hobie 17. Now, I would say I'm not so experienced with the Nacras. I know the 6.0, and the 6.0 is a snarling beast. That is a powerful boat, very serious boat. So if you're going to be sailing with the same crew, perhaps if you're going to be really charging all the time, the 6.0 is a very powerful boat. It's not as wide as the other boats generally, which are of the same length. So it's more kind of similar to the Hurricane 5.9 to say a Tornado because of the width. So it's a bit narrower, which means you'll get that hull flying in less wind on the 6.0. Whereas the 5.7, a lot more user-friendly, less powerful. And if you're going to be sailing with a variety of different crews, perhaps occasionally sailing with kids, just friends who don't really know much about sailing, I think you're going to find that a lot more giving and forgiving. That's what I reckon. Very good. All right. All right. Thanks very much to Laura for the, I think that's called a super sticker. Thank you very much. Super stickers are available. Just check it out below. Yeah. There we go. Timo says, finally made it to a live second. Cheers from Finland. Great to have you on board, Timo. Right, we've got Francisco, who's in Geneva, Switzerland. Great to have you on board. Okay, so another question from Laura here. In the race start sequence, before you go over the start line, how do you keep your boat in idle position? Oh, we've been there. I've gone back in time. All right. BGVDB in response to 2 on the Nacra 6.0 question says, I love my 6.0. It's fast, but very stable, making it excellent for taking on people with less sailing experience, which sort of goes against what I just said. But I would go with the experience of someone who's actually got one rather than someone who's just sailed one once about 30 years ago. Yeah. All right. We've got Nick F in Ohio, USA. Good morning. Chris is there. Morning. Morning to everybody where it is morning. Good afternoon to everybody where it's the afternoon, and good evening to everyone else. Okay, we've got John on board who says, what is the best time of year to sail in Vassiliki? I'm thinking of a winter getaway. I would say sorry, 2 shakes. Got a feeling I might have a slightly dirty camera. All right. Yeah, so best times of year to come to Vassiliki. Firstly, the general season starts May, and then the general season finishes mid-October. So that's kind of ruling out the winter a fair bit. Second factor is the local airport. It's called Trapeze, which has the code PVK for your convenience. Now the local airport, it opens, I believe it's the start of April and then closes at the end of October. So if you don't want to have to fly to Athens and then either get a hire car or a bus from Athens, it's about 5 hours from Athens to get here, maybe 6 if there's a bit of traffic. Then flying into Trapeze, the local airport, is much more desirable. Then talking about what should we go for next? The amount of people here. If you like it a bit more quiet in the village as well as on the water, then the sweet spot, if you like it quiet on the water, is definitely the first 3 weeks in May. We can get some amazing wind at that time. The water is colder because it hasn't had as much time to warm up. So start of May, you definitely want to be wearing some sort of wetsuit, maybe a summer suit, long legs, short arms. Summer suits are very good because of the long legs, stops you from tearing holes in your knees on the trampoline, rather than a shorty wetsuit where for people who aren't sailing all the time, if you're just going into a shorty wetsuit or wearing shorts, we do find people wearing holes in their knees on the trampoline quite a lot. Then towards into June, then in my opinion, we're really hitting the sweet spot. June is good because the wind is more consistent. So in May, we'll probably get 4 days of the week with champagne, 3 days of the week with good, maybe a cheap sparkling wine, but not the real French champagne. And then into June, we're getting a bit more consistency with the wind, but still not so busy in the village and on the water. Then when we get into July and August, then statistically, that is when we should be getting champagne 6 days of the week and 1 day of the week with quite a nice sparkling wine. Yeah, so that is a good time to come. But it's July and August when it's the main holiday period for the other countries in the area. So the village, Vassiliki, gets really quite busy, and it does get more busy on the water as well. So a consideration. Yeah. And then as we go into September, it starts to quiet down a bit, especially in the village, but we're still getting the champagne sailing conditions, maybe down to 5 days of the week. But the water should still be warm at that point. So once we get to kind of late June, that is when it's shorts weather out on the water. So there we go. And then once we get into October, then it really gets quiet in the village and on the water, but the champagne can really go either way. You know, it might be corked. I don't even know if champagne can be corked, but you can get every day champagne, or you can just get 1 or 2 days of the week champagne. So it is a bit of a lottery as we move out of the main season. And then over the winter, we don't get very much wind at all unless there's a storm. And then, of course, you don't want to be out sailing in that sort of stuff. Thanks for the question. Very good. All right. So just incidentally, if you are looking to get dyneema rigging on your boat, the place to go to, which Chris in Texas endorses, is Coligo Marine. They do the best dyneema rigging. And Chris says you can feel free to get in touch through him at any time. And if you want to get in touch with Chris, get in touch with me. I'll put you in touch with Chris. There we go. All right, we got Scott on board, Cultus Lake, Oregon, I believe, who is I've just started making the next speed stick update video today, and Scott is dominating at the moment in the single-handed 16 class. Very good job. Scott says good morning to the Joyrider community and to Fleet 240 in Santa Cruz as well, where Scott has been doing some sailing. All right, we've got Kevin on board in Kiel, Germany. We've got Alessandro in Sardinia. That's in the Mediterranean Sea. It's one of these big islands in the Mediterranean. Very nice too. Alessandro had a Hobie 14. He's now the owner of a Dart 15. Can you give any advice for a catamaran 16 feet, easy to handle, single-handed? Yeah, it sort of depends on what you're looking at and how much money you're looking to spend. I think the main contenders here would be, of course, the Hobie 16. Why the Hobie 16? Because there's more Hobie 16s in the world than any other catamaran. So in theory, it would be much easier to find a used Hobie 16 than anything else. And as long as it's not too windy, you can sail the Hobie 16 single-handed. It's not too heavy to handle on your own on the beach. I believe 144 kilos, a Hobie 16. Then next choice, 2 up or with 1, the Prindle 16, perhaps more difficult to find in Europe. They're going to be pretty rare, I'd say. What else? The Nacra 500. Now, this is a boat that's really been catching my eye. You can get these in Europe because, as you may know, Holland is where I think it's one of the, I don't know if Nacra International is based in Holland, but it certainly seems to be. Holland is a stronghold of Nacra catamarans. So the Nacra 500, very versatile. The 500 has the skeg hulls, which makes it very easy to tack, easy to sail upwind. You can put it up the beach as long as you're reasonably careful without risking damage. What else? The Dart 16, formula plastic. That means the hulls are extremely durable. You're not going to put a dent in those bad boys. You're going to dent the beach when you go up it. So there are some options there for different 16-foot catamarans, easy to single hand. But I think you're nailing it already with the Dart 15. That is a great single-handed boat, only 1 foot shorter. So I think that's a good place to start. Anyway, all right, we got Brett on board. Hello, Brett. Loving your work, learning to sail so fast. Just got a 1988 vintage Hobie 16, sailing out of Tankerton, Kent. Love it so far. Yeah, what is not to love? Oh, glad you're having a good time there. All right. Sorry, just lost you in the live chat. Do you have a low-cost solution to replacing the tiller connecting bar fastening 1988 vintage Hobie 16? I have the old school nut bush bolt bushing spring that doesn't seem very seaman-like. Now, we're in the workshop, so I'll see if I can get one. Okay, I haven't got a complete one, but yeah, this with these sort of half pieces. So what would happen is the tiller would sit on here, and then this would be this way up with the connecting bar on there. And if you're not a big fan of this system, then I'd say the lowest cost. Hold on, I'm going to get something else. Now, this is the more modern option where this goes into the end of the tiller. That's the bar coming from the rudder stock. And then the tiller connecting bar effectively has a hole in the end, which slots over here. You put a clip over the end, holds it in there nicely. It's very quick to use. Now, if you wanted to really do it as cheaply as possible, one option would be to buy a pair of these, but they are going to be, because it's coming from Hobie, they are going to be reassuringly expensive. I would say in excess of 25 euros each, probably. That's just a guess. And then when you've got these, you can make your new tiller connecting bar with oh, you don't need a new bar, you just need new fastening. Then unfortunately, you're probably going to need to replace the tiller connecting bar, because I believe with the old style adjusters, let's call it a conrod tiller connecting bar, they're generally a bit shorter. So you're going to need a longer conrod, which means it more expense. But what you can do, rather than buying a proper conrod from Hobie Cat, you can buy a piece of aluminium tube with the same wall thickness, outside diameter. And then what you can do at one end, you could just drill a hole straight through the bar. And then at the other end, you can get the adjuster. So you'd probably be looking at, in total, about 100 euros, 120 euros to completely update your system. So I'm afraid that is the best we can do at this time. But because you don't like the system, this was the system on the Hobie 16 and on all of the Hobies in Europe up until about 1995 or so, when they started changing them. And that system is absolutely fine. It's just, if the bolt that goes through all of this is bent, just replace the bolt and just get it as tight as you can, but so it still moves freely. And it's a good system, so there's not actually any real need to change it. All right, so I won't read out everything where you're talking amongst yourselves. Okay, we've got Dan Sport DR123. Hello, Dan. More maintenance than sailing, but I'm replacing the trapeze foot padding. So I was wondering if you had any recommendation for removing the adhesive under the original side rail carpet. Yeah. Now, it's going to take a while. I'm sure everyone's, in fact, for getting rid of the glue, if anybody has got any suggestions, don't put it in the live chat, put it in the comments, so that then the guys who are watching this later can learn from your experience at all. But if you are using any products to get rid of old glue, we want to know about it. Put it in the comments, not in the live chat. But you can use, I believe, WD-40, use petrol. But what I generally find the most effective is to take a Stanley knife blade, just the blade. All right, we're in the workshop. Let's demo this. All right, so we've got a Stanley knife blade, and it's just a real case of scrapey like this. And the way to psychologically get through this, because if you look at the whole thing, you've probably got a massive area that you have to do. So just focus on a small area and go, I'm going to get that area clean, scrapey like this. Oh, it's nice. And then move on to the next area. Can take quite a while to get that old glue off. And then if you're on the fiberglass rather than on metal, you might be a bit worried about scraping the gel coat, but don't worry too much about scraping the gel coat a little bit, because if you're going to be putting the new grip over the top, having it a bit rough rather than shiny is actually going to help the new glue to stick to that. That is what I would recommend. All right, Chris says, sorry for clogging up the chat, Joe. No problem there, Chris. It's really nice that you're helping everyone with your knowledge there and experience. So, oh, I beg your pardon. So Chris says, Colligo Marine, which does this dyneema splicing, is actually in California. I thought it was in Texas, just because that's where Chris is. He says, if you splice it yourself, use sailmaker thimbles, not regular wire thimbles. So what Chris is talking about, a thimble is one of these things that you'd see at the end of your wire, generally. And then if you've got your wire, it would come up, go round here, and there it would be. So the sailmaker's thimble is, so this would be a thimble which is for rigging, whereas a sailmaker's one is similar, but it's closed at the end. So that's the recommendation if you're doing a bit of dyneema splicing there. Excellent. All right, we've got HJ on board who says, Calimera, greetings from Lake Constance. Great to have you on board, HJ. All right, BGVDB says, thanks very much. Going to give it a try. Then we've got Toots. Thanks very much. And Toots says, you've talked me into the Nacra 5.7. Nice. I think both are good options. I think the other good thing with the slightly smaller boat is it's going to be a bit more manageable also on land to move it around. Not quite as big, not quite as heavy. So there we go. Chris says it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Certainly is. It's actually 6:20 here. Wow. All right, we've got Dave on board. Office Hands Dave, Hobie 16 Amateur Hour, who says getting on an airplane next Friday to come and sing some songs and sail. All right, nice. So Office Hands Dave will be here in Vassiliki, and he is proving that it is possible to come to Vassiliki from the USA, and it's not that bad a journey. Right, we've got Lee on board. Hello, Lee. Good to have you with us. Oh, this is some big information. We've got Toot, who we all know and love. Lake Buchanan, Texas. He has got a Hobie 16 for sale. Start bidding, please. So if you're looking for a Hobie 16, Texas, Toot's got one. All right, Laura says, hi, Scott. Wish you were sailing with us on our annual long-distance sail to Moss Landing this week. All right. There's a lot of elevator music going on. All right, we've got Dan Sport DR123. I can't remember what we were talking about before, but Dan's got a 1971 Hobie 16 from Maine, USA. Now that is what we call proper vintage. It's got to be one of the earliest 16s out there. Okay. Dave says, oh, talking about the tiller connections, Dave says that pin tiller connector system is worth every penny. Also, yeah, it does allow very easy adjustments as well. But with the old school adjuster, you could still adjust it quite nicely. But if you haven't adjusted it for a bit, to adjust it might require a small hammer. Yes. All right, we've got Keith on board, who's got a 1985 Hobie 14. What is your preferred site for replacement parts and accessories? I brought the snap shackle you had on the assembly video. Nice. Yeah, depends where you are. But I think if you're in the USA, it's generally Murray's in San Diego. Oh, well, I think Murray's have got a number of different branches, unless I'm mistaken. Yeah, so Murray's is the place in the USA. In Europe, I'm not sure, actually. Yeah, there's... tell you what, I'm going to have to do some research on that, Keith, because the parts that I'm getting are for the Hobies. I'm getting them direct from Hobie Cat Europe. And then when I'm replacing parts with non-original parts, like, for example, these aluminium bars that we use for replacing conrods or tiller extensions, I'm just getting those from local aluminium suppliers within Greece. So there we go. Dave says, don't need a new conrod. The toe-in adjuster is long enough to make the difference. Good to know. Chris says the comments are not there and the chat stays there. Okay, thanks for that, Chris. All right, so just finishing off the live chat before we go into the preloaded questions. Sorry for the delay. All right, at 47 minutes, we're going to take a short commercial break. Oh, that's good stuff. Yes. So if you like the information that you're getting from Joyrider TV and you want it to continue, then Joyrider TV does need your support. Two good ways supporting Joyrider TV. Method number one, Patreon. You can check out the link in all of the videos in the video description. Option number two, visit totaljoyrider.com. Order yourself a t-shirt, a hoodie, a hat, or I can even do you a custom design with your sale colors and sale number on them. And we're shipping from every continent on the planet. So just because you're in Australia, don't think, hold on, are these coming from Greece? That's going to take ages. No, we're shipping from Australia if you are in Australia, for example. So there you go. That support Joyrider TV and get something nice to wear. All right. Anyway, Toot says, saw an interesting article where a man mounted wings on his Hobie 14. Interesting. I tell you what, there is more interesting stuff coming. The next episode of Show Us Your Cat, we've got some absolute gold, which is from Vic in, I believe, Ontario, Canada, and St. Catherine's Multi-Hole Club. And what he is doing with wings, you are not going to believe. So keep an eye out for that. Probably won't be until next weekend at the earliest. There we go. Oh, Keith is in USA, Minnesota. All right. Yeah. So Murray's is the place to go. There we go. Oh, yeah. Chris is quite right. In Europe, BNR Water Sports has got probably the most wide selection of used parts for catamarans. The other one is catparts.nl, which is also Hobie Cat in Holland. And Johan, who runs that place, is one of the nicest guys on the planet. And he is very good at getting you exactly what you need in Europe. All right. So Laura says, do you have time to explain crew duties during the starting sequence? All right. Yes, we do. All right. No further questions, please, in the live chat, because we're getting there. And I've got several preloaded questions to go for, unless, you know, if you've got an absolute burning question that you have to get off your chest, then get it off your chest. All right, what are the jobs of the crew during the race start sequence? Job number one is the crew is on lookout. If you're lucky enough to have a crew on the boat, utilize that extra pair of eyes to be looking everywhere and informing the helm of where the other boats are, where the start line is, where the course is. One of the first things you should do when you go out to the race course is find out where the race course is. Where are all of the marks? Because most important thing when you go sailing, where are we going? If you don't know where you're going, doesn't matter how fast you're sailing, you might be going in the wrong direction. What good is that? Know where you're going. That's a very important job for the crew. But looking out for all of that stuff, especially knowing where the other boats are in a 360-degree lookout kind of radius of your boat, so you know where the boats are behind. Perhaps there's someone coming to kind of try to get, you know, what we don't want is if we're on the start line like here, most important on the start line is we don't want someone coming into this area here, because we want to keep that area so when we start we can bear off into it, get a bit of speed on and get away. So the crew needs to be checking for anybody who looks like they might be looking to attack our leeward quarter there. Yeah, keep an eye out. So crew's job number one, look out. Number two, this is quite obvious, jib operator. Very obvious. We've spoken about that, what we need to do with the jib. Number three, the crew needs to be the one who can say whether how far you are from the start line. So start line, let's just call it start line. So the crew needs to know where the start line is, whether you're, how many boat lengths you are back from the start line, whether you're getting dangerously close. So, and the crew needs to really have that poker face on the start line. So start line, number four, timer. It's a very good idea indeed, if you're going out boat racing at any level, for the crew and the helm to both have watches which have a timer on it. So what we generally like to do when we're going racing is one of the people on the boat, let's say the starting sequence is a 4-minute sequence. So one of the people on the boat, doesn't matter which, is ready on their watch for when the 4-minute sequence starts, and the other is ready with a 3-minute timer. So if perhaps when you got the 4-minute sequence, you think, oh, it was a little bit early, it's a little bit late, then the other person can get accurately the 3-minute sequence. So the timer, very important. I would say these are the most important jobs of the crew on the start line. If I've missed anything there, put it in the comments below. All right, as Chris said, you probably can't get at the comments right now while this is live, but if you're watching this later on, put it in the comments. Very good. Oh, Chris has got another one. Main crew duties, accept all blame for anything that goes wrong. Oh, yeah. All right, good question, that. Yeah, I think that's about the size of it. And one optional one, 5, is maybe the traveller. Spelt wrong. If you like, but that is up to how you like to sail the boat. Or it could even be the main sheet to a certain extent. Also some sort of counselling as well, just making sure that the helm is calm, that kind of thing. And then when you're revving up to start, the crew should be in the right position on the boat. Like at 10 seconds to go, you want to be in your fast upwind sailing position, whatever that may be, not like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, now let's get in our fast sailing position. You want to be in that position before the race starts, not afterwards, because the guys who were in that position on time, they're going to have that advantage over you if you're only just getting your boat going up to speed once the gun goes. There we go. All right, so we've got John Claude on board in Trinidad. Great to have you with us, John Claude, in the office. Loads of rain. Yeah, we've had rain actually here this week. Very unusual for this time of year, but it's an unusual year. HJ says, a job for the winter season, cleaning the sails. Do you have any advice on this job? Yeah, not so much really. Yeah, what I'm going to have to do on that, HJ, is I'm going to have to check with Thanos from OS3 Sales here in Vassiliki Bay to see what products he would recommend using, and then perhaps I can put out a short video on sail care and winterizing. It's a great topic, especially for those of you who are in the later part of your season. Yeah, very good. All right, so we're going to go on to the preloaded questions. No further questions in the live chat unless you've got anything absolutely burning to get sorted out with your boat before the weekend, for example. So we've got Joaquin, who I don't know where he is, but he's got a Wildcat. Nice. So for those of you who don't know, the Wildcat is a Formula 18 catamaran, which is, it was Hobie Cat's replacement for the Hobie Tiger, and it came out quite a while ago, I think 2008, 9, something like that. And it's got the modern hull shape with the upside down triangular hull shape, so loads of volume at the bottom. And what Joaquin is looking into is what are the effects of mast rake on tacking. All right, so I would say generally, so if we've got our boat here and our mast, the further forwards that we put the mast, so this, on this picture here, the mast is dead upright. This is always going to be too far upright if it's dead straight up. If you have the mast without any mast rake, so let's have 3 different examples of mast rake. So we've got none, we've got a bit, and then we've got a lot. So with none, the boat is always going to want to sail downwind. So if we look at our boat from the top, the boat is always going to want to turn away from the wind, because what we're doing with the mast rake too far forwards is, if this is our center of lateral resistance here, our pivot point, here, the center of effort is going to be, so if we just draw on a dotted sail here, so we've got the center of effort of the whole rig, but the center of effort is kind of like this area here, and there we've got the center of effort well forwards of the center of lateral resistance, which means it's always going to pull you away from the wind. And that is the worst thing that we can have. It'll make it, yeah, it'll make it horrible to sail. And when we want to tack, when we pull the main sheet in, it's not going to be putting pressure behind the pivot point very much. So it's going to make it very difficult to tack. A boat like this, like a Wildcat, like a modern Formula 18, should always be easy to tack because of the flat bottom hulls, because of the dagger boards, the high aspect rudders. So if it's not easy to tack, then there's something badly wrong going on with your mast rake or something else, but the mast rake most likely. So we need to move the mast further back. So when we move the mast further back, of course, our sails are going to be coming back, which is going to put the center of effort further back in relation to the center of lateral resistance, which means it's not going to be pulling the boat off downwind like that. The boat is more likely to, if we were to put the stick down, stop steering, the boat would just go straight, or possibly even if you've got the main sheet in tight, the boat will head up into the wind slightly. That's what we want. When you put the stick down on an upwind point of sail, we want the boat just to gently turn up into the wind. That is what we're looking for, because what that means is the center of effort is just at the back of the center of lateral resistance, giving it that slight push. It'll make it very easy to tack, easy to go upwind, very nice too. Then if we put the mast back a lot, then the center of effort is going to be completely behind the center of lateral resistance, which means the boat is going to really want to go up into the wind, which is when, if assuming, I'm hoping everybody's done their homework and tuned their rudders nicely, that if your rudders are tuned nicely, then you're going to have pull on the rudders as well. If your rudders aren't tuned nicely, it might be that your rudders aren't correct, which is giving you that weather helm where you have to pull the stick hard just to keep going in a straight line. But if your mast is way too far back, then that is going to have that effect as well. Yeah, so the boat is going to tack really well, but you might find if it's too far back, it's difficult to get the boat to turn away from the wind on the new side. So there is definitely a sweet spot. Now, I could just say at this point, check out the video on mast rake settings. But what we're doing when we're measuring the mast rake, because this is a fairly universal mast rake setting for most boats, like the F18 or anything that is sailed with a conventional tight rig, where you're tightening the rig up almost as much as you can before you go sailing, not the Hobie 16, not the Dart 18, is what we do. I've got a bit of string. You'd think so, wouldn't you? All right, 2 shakes. So what we're going to do to measure the mast rake is, yeah, thanks to, need a bit of elevator music there, is we're going to take the trapeze wire, untie it, and we're going to put it so that it touches the fitting on the bow, the clevis pin that goes onto the fitting, which holds the bridle wires on. Yeah. And then keeping that same point, holding this tight, we take it to the back, and then where the same point that we're holding touches the back, that is what our mast rake is said to be. So if we do a close-up of the back of the boat, there's the back of the boat. We're going 3D. Oh my goodness, are there no end to the artistic skills here? There's our designer grip. There's our foot strap there. Nice. All right, so where we touch that trapeze line down on the back, what we're looking for is on an F-18 style boat, never any further forwards than the corner. Yeah, if it's further forwards than the corner, generally that is going to bring the mast too far upright, and we're into this mast too far upright scenario. So what we're looking for is somewhere between the corner and about 2 inches down the back of the boat. That is the sweet spot. So we'll give that a tick. So that is what we're looking for. Now, quite interestingly, if you're going to be sailing mostly downwind, putting the mast further back is actually going to be very beneficial, because it's going to help when you've got the spinnaker up. That's putting a lot of pressure forwards of the pivot point of your center of lateral resistance. So the further you put the mast back, you're going to be getting the rudders back towards that sweet spot. So it is a difficult balance on the F-18 style boats, because of the spinnaker getting the mast in the right spot. But the further back you put it is generally better. Most boats, you can't actually, with the adjustment that comes as standard, you can't actually put the mast further back, like way too far back. So there we go. That is the answer that I'm coming up with there. All right. So next one, in the preloaded from Greg. Greg says this is about trapeze harness. I wear a Magic Marine smart harness when trapezing, but I don't feel like I have enough back support. I've adjusted the straps so the hook is in line with my belly button. Should the hook be any higher? I would say where your trapeze hook should be is sort of the same as where, unless you're some sort of cool teenager who wears his trousers really low so his pants are showing, where your belt would be should be where your trapeze hook is. So a bit lower down than the belly button, sort of like, yeah, where your belt would be. So when you put your trapeze harness on, before you crank on the back strap, this is quite often, this is a common mistake. Trapeze harness goes on, really cranking on the back support. Don't do that first. First thing you should tighten up when you put the trapeze harness on is tighten up the hook. So it's where your belt would be. Tighten up the hook, make the leg straps not so they're massively tight, because that's going to hurt, just so you're taking the slack out of the leg straps. And then only once you're ready to actually sail the boat, tighten up the back support. What you'll have in your well, what most trapeze harnesses have is an adjustable pad that sits on the inside, and you can actually move that up and down, so you can get that, adjust that so it feels like it is giving you the maximum amount of back support. Now, and then it is one of the downsides of the Magic Marine Smart Harness, because it's basically the most budget harness that Magic Marine do. I've been using them for, I don't know, over 15 years now, and I absolutely love it, because it's really, it's not bulky. If you do go for the higher up in the range trapeze harness, they do offer more back support, but that comes at the price of them being more bulky and more stiff, so you're not as flexible on the boat. There we go. All right, going back to the live chat. RP, hello RP, great to have you on board. We're all about the Nacra 6.0 today. This is great. However, does anybody recall seeing a Nacra 6.0 in Show Us Your Cat? I think no. If you've got a Nacra 6.0, let's do a Show Us Your Cat Nacra 6.0 special. Why not? If we get enough Nacras in there, we can do it. So RP says, I'm trying to set up my Nacra 6.0 with Spinnaker, already spent £1,000 and I'm nowhere near. What a nightmare. Oh dear. If you want RP, you can send me an email with pictures and I can see if I can help you out there at all, remotely, of course. Because, you know, just trying to help. Chris says, welcome to the retrofit and custom world. Yeah, not easy. Okay, Chris says, I suggest for all this chat, read Catamaran. Oh, so Chris has got some recommendations about racing, some reading materials. Read Catamaran Racing for the 90s. It has articles covering almost all of these boats by guys like Randy Smythe, Rod Seam, Hobie Alter Jr. and others. Well worth looking that one up. So that's Catamaran Racing for the 90s. All right. RP says 3D. I should think so. Hello, Mason. How are you doing? Have you ever fished? Wow, that's a big question. I fished once or twice, but only when I was a youngster. I haven't really done any fishing since. Too busy giving it the beans, as you may have seen. So not much fishing there. Lee says pants on the ground. Yeah, the trapeze height belt for a conventional civilized grown-up, let's call it. All right. So, as you should. All right. So back to the last preloaded question. This one comes from Max in Rosenheim, Germany. I believe Max has just got hold of an Inter 18, one of the earlier F-18 boats. And he says, any tips to get an F-18 downwind running, or are there typical failures you can make? Wrong mast, rake, shrouds, diamond wires too loose, wrong weight, trim, etc. Yeah, so with any F-18s, the measurements that we're looking for are pretty similar. So we've already talked about where to put the mast rake. That is going to have a massive difference. If you're finding when you're going downwind with the spinnaker up, if you've really got to push the rudders away hard all of the time because of this lee helm, so if you're always having to push with the stick, then you should put the mast further back. So even if you're going halfway down the hull with this method of measurement, you know, that might be where you need to put it to get it in the sweet spot. As a rule, what I would do if I had absolutely no idea of the lengths of the rigging of the boat when I first get it, I would set the mast as far back as it will actually go, set it up, get some rig tension on, and then measure it, and then perhaps even if it's halfway down the hull, sail the boat, see how it feels, and then if you're getting loads of weather helm and the rudders are set up nicely, then start bringing it up one hole at a time. But by going as far back as you can first, then you know that there's only actually one way that you can go. And it's not like, oh, we'll try a bit of that. And it takes out a lot of the guesswork from your setup procedure there. All right. So then other things that are factors to get the boat sailing nicely. All right, as mentioned by Max, spreader rake is important. All right, we're just going to go through this fairly quickly. So spreader rake, if this is the mast, these are the spreaders. So as you may know, on these types of boat, the mast has these spreaders, which would be about here. And then attached to the spreaders, we've got what are called diamond wires. And what they do is they stiffen this part of the mast and they push this part of the mast forwards, which puts a bit of bend into the mast. We call that pre-bend, only a little bit of bend. So the spreader rake, the way we measure this is from basically, we take a straight edge, like a straight batten, and we'll put, I'll do this different color, and we'll take the batten and put it between the wires, not the spreaders, the wires, just above the spreaders, like that. And then we measure the spreader rake by measuring between the back edge of the mast and that straight edge. And the spreader rake, this distance that we want, now I'm assuming that Max's combined crew weight would be either medium or heavy. So your spreader rake, this measurement wants to be 6 or perhaps maybe 5 centimeters, 5 or 6 centimeters there on the spreader rake. Once we've got our spreader rake set, we'll then tension the diamond wires. Now the diamond wires we tension according to wind strength, and we're going to, this is where it's really helpful to have one of these. This is a loose gauge. This is the industry standard rig tension gauge. This measures how tight wires are on the types of boat which we're talking about. Very useful indeed. They cost about 120, between 120 and 150 euros. You don't ever buy a second-hand one because it might have gone out a little bit, but very useful. So the rig tension that we're looking at is according to wind strength. And if the wind is light, so definitely not trapezing conditions. So light, sorry about the writing. So light, we want to set that at 35 on the diamond wires with the rig, with the loose gauge. If the wind is marginal, and this would be if you're going to set the diamond wires once and then not adjust them if the wind changes. So that would be like trapezing conditions, but not really going for maximum amount of D power. Then we'd want it at 40. But then if we really want to depower the boat for strong winds, we go up to 45 on the loose gauge. There we go. And then the final factor that we would look at, again, we need the loose gauge for this, or you could check out the video on rig tension without a loose gauge, is the rig tension. I just, spoiler alert there. So the rig tension we set according to crew weight again. So if we are lighter, here we go, paying attention here. So this is diamond, spreaders. I'll just write spread and rig. So if we're lighter than 140 kilos combined, we want the rig tension to be 28. If we're between 140 and 160 kilos, then we go for 26. And then if we're over 160 kilos combined, then we go for 24. So if we're sailing in a variety of different conditions with a variety of different crews, you don't, maybe if you're not racing like in the World Championships or something, you don't want to be going adjusting everything every time. So what we'll do is we'll go for the middle ground. I would set the spreaders maybe at 5.5. The diamonds at 40. This is all quite obvious now. The rig tension at 26. And you will be good to go. So there you go, Max. I hope that helps somehow. All right, just going to finish off with the live chat, and that will be enough for today. No further questions, please, because it is, as you will know, time for a beer. All right, so where are we? We've got Oscar on board. Hello from France. Great to have you on board. We got Quentin on board, who's French as well. We are hitting France at the end of the session. Great to have you with us. Bonjour tout le monde. Oscar says, do you believe buying a Hobie 14 for solo sailing is a good idea? No, I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's a great idea. Yes, do it. But be aware that the Hobie 14 is not an easy boat to sail. So if you're willing to put in the effort, use some good technique, then the 14 delivers a very, very good time. But it is not an easy boat to sail, just letting you know. But it is a very good boat. There are a lot of Hobie 14s around, so the likelihood of finding a used Hobie 14 is pretty strong. It's light enough to be able to handle on the beach. It's got a great feel to it, but you do need to use some very good technique, especially when you're tacking. There we go. Quentin continues, do you prefer the Hobie 14 or the Hobie 16? Generally speaking, I prefer the Hobie 16 because I like to have that flexibility of sailing with a crew or sailing solo. With a Hobie 14, you'd only really be using that single-handed unless you're sailing with, let's say, never more than about 110 kilos, something like that on the boat. Right, Raf says they are quite pricey. Oh, I can't remember what we're talking. Oh, you're talking about the loose gauge. Yeah, they are quite pricey. So perhaps this is back to anybody with an F18 style catamaran, the loose gauge. If you sail in a sailing club and there's a number of you, like say there's 5 of you who've got similar boats, then why not all club together and buy one between you? So then you can all check your rigging and then make sure that nobody takes it home. Always keep it in a place at the club. That would be a good idea. All right. We've got Roger on board from Kansas City. Great to have you with us, Roger. Says, where the wind never stops. And then Toot says, Dallas is windier than Chicago. Okay, we're having a who's windier contest here. All right. Thanks, Max, for the question. Chris says the Corpus is the most windy of them all. All right. Oscar says, continue with the Hobie 14. What makes the Hobie 14 difficult to sail? I can tell you that. It is the size of the hulls. The hulls have got extremely low volume. That means they're very small, which means when you sit on the boat, where you're sitting on the boat, whether you move forwards or backwards, has a very big effect on how the boat sails. And then the other thing that makes it difficult is for the size of the boat and these hulls with the asymmetric hulls. So this hull shape like this, the asymmetric hulls where we've got a flat side and a rounded side, it doesn't have any single pivot point. You see, this whole area is the pivot point, which makes it much more difficult. But it's the volume in the hulls which is really the thing that is difficult at first. But when you get them going, it goes, and it really does feel fantastic. But it's not the weight. The boat's quite lightweight. The sails are perhaps a little bit big for the amount of volume. That probably doesn't help. All right. Scott says, thanks for another great Q&A. See you in 2 weeks. Great to have you on board, Scott. Yeah, so we are signing off here. Raf says there is always someone in the club who has a loose gauge. Very nice. All right. Roger says average wind speed is 27 miles per hour at our lake. Most of the time it's too strong for my skill level. All right. And the final one, this is from Daniel, and this is really going to be the last one, is why are the rudders angled inwards? So as you may be aware, we have got on our boat, here's our boat. When we set up the rudders, we have them with what we call toe in. Toe being the front edge. This is an exaggeration. We have them like this. This is a massive exaggeration. It would usually, be no more than 1 centimetre, 10 mil between the front edge and the back edge. But the reason we have them toed in is because the rudder on the leeward side is always under so much more pressure than the rudder on the windward side. There we go. So thanks very much for tuning in today, everybody. There's still time to hit that super sticker if you'd like to. Otherwise, I'll be back next week with more Q&A. On Sunday, there'll be the speed stick update video. So check that one out. And then I'll have some more great stuff coming out next week. We are looking absolutely champagne here in Vassiliki Bay for next week. So there you go. Thanks again. And we'll see you soon. Have a great weekend. Stay safe out there. Thank you very much.